I made a video a month or so ago talking about ethics in games journalism, and basically the conversation has often been that games journalism has been compromised by social politics, namely feminism, but my argument was that any ethics in games journalism has largely been compromised by capitalism and these massive corporate outlets, and I went into detail about how IGN often has a conflict of interest with what stories they cover and the sponsorship deals they make with the top gaming publishers and gaming developers for, games like Cyberpunk, for example. And I talked about how the advertising works as someone with a bit of a background in journalism and doing these sort of ad deals and stuff like that. But today what we're going to talk about is this theme being extended even further and talk about the drama around IGN posting its solidarity with the Palestinians and then promptly taking those posts down. I'm going to talk about how this drama even started in the first place, why IGN even posted about this, because people might think it's weird, but they have done stuff for like Black Lives Matter in the past. We're going to talk about sort of the silence of the video game industry, because I was talking about this before this even happened. And then we're generally going to make the larger point about how capitalism, corporations, stuff like that really do compromise the ethics of games journalism in general, but also singular games journalists. If you want to support my work continuing for the future, regardless of what YouTube do, please consider becoming a patron. If you want to join our growing community, please check out the Discord and the subreddit in the description. And if you want to follow me personally, check out @the on Instagram and Twitter. And also u/TommyCahill1995 for my personal Reddit. Thanks so much for the support recently. We're chugging along to 35. For every 5k we get a new chocolate orange. Help me hit that milestone. I've been covering a lot of this Israel stuff lately on my second channel, the Kavernacle Extra. It's mainly just archive streams from this main channel, and I stream Tuesday and Thursday. I'm also going to be on Mike from PA stream tomorrow, 5 p.m. British time. I think that's 12 p.m. Eastern time, talking about British politics, so go check that out. And if you want to hear my longer takes about the situation in Gaza right now, I'm not really going to make this video about that. But last week I covered it when I talked about Gal Gadot and Natalie Portman, and I also did a big old stream about it when I talked about Andrew Yang and David Pakman. So that is on the second channel. Go check that out if you really want my total unfiltered opinion on this stuff. Now, the tension has really been ramping up in the region for the last month or so, but let's say to the wider public, it's really been known over the last week or so. Because if you don't follow politics, you might have missed all the protests and the far-right Israeli mobs going into Palestinian areas. But what I noticed myself was many games journalists were not saying anything about Palestine. Many gaming personalities who are streamers and YouTubers were also not saying anything. These are people who have done really great streams for Syrian children, for Black Lives Matter, for various great causes, but they had not said anything. Now, I'm not even going to call the person out that I'm thinking of in my head, but they were both interacting with political streamers who talk about this stuff non-stop while totally ignoring it. And there's just, general games journalists weren't saying anything. And I said in my streams last week in my videos, why does it have to be the people who may be marginalized in a Western society or might have a background of their people, their religion, their, ethnicity facing oppression and discrimination? Why is it these people who have to stand up for the Palestinians? Why can't more white Westerners in America and the UK be the ones to talk about this stuff? Why is it left to Indian people, Muslims, black people, to a lesser extent Irish people as well? But this is what happened, and this is what sparked it all off. So Tamoor Hussain is the managing editor of Gamespot, and he's a British Pakistani Muslim, and he made a video calling out everyone, basically saying, I haven't really seen any solidarity with Palestine. And I'm going to share clips of his video. It's very good. I'm going to link it in the description, maybe in the pinned comment as well. And go watch the whole thing for yourself. I'm going to play a fair bit of it just to give you the gist of it. But very, very well put by Tamoor.
I'm going to be honest. The response in the industry is a stark contrast to the way big streamers rallied for other causes over the last few years. I don't wish to draw a comparison between the way streamers and influencers reacted for one cause or another to how they have or haven't to the one for Palestine. But I think it's important to speak to some of the people that have the reach to make an impact and ask them to think about what they can do. I can't help but reflect on why the awareness seems so low right now. People have the ability to educate themselves to the extent where you can see the need to support Palestinians that are suffering. And this was the case for other major social issues that garnered a groundswell of support and activism online. People made it their business to learn and build an understanding so that they could utilize their platforms to effectively support these causes. But this doesn't seem to be happening for Palestinians. And do whatever you can to raise awareness. It's simply humans being treated ruthlessly. And that's something that anyone can feel compelled to speak out against. The suffering of Palestinian people is something that, for most, is taking place in a far-off land and has been for decades. The Middle East may as well be a different planet, but more importantly, it's always been presented in Western media as a place perpetually in conflict. Whether it's the news or other forms of entertainment, we've been trained to believe that war is the natural state of the Middle East and its people. And because of that, the things that people see and hear in passing don't look like upheaval. And I think there's a reason for that. Our games, movies, TV shows, comic books show the region as a staging ground for fighting and nothing more. But it's important to unpack that, because what is happening there, if you really stop to think about it, is people living perpetually under siege. But we've been trained to gloss over things that are happening there. The media does a lot of work to dehumanize people in the Middle East and make it feel like this web of complicated politics that is impossible to untangle. And my message to people out there with platforms, especially in the games industry, is what you're scrolling past on Twitter, Facebook, or anywhere else and not engaging with is much simpler than the world wants you to believe it is. It's children, men, women, having their lives destroyed. Ask yourself, what makes the suffering of the people of Palestine different enough that you don't feel compelled to act in the same way? Is it that it's too complicated for you to weigh in on? It isn't. Could it be that you fear reprisal from others on the internet? If so, did that stop you from supporting other causes that carry the same risk before? Is it that you're worried about brands taking action against you? Did that stop you before, and is avoiding the risk of that important enough that you're willing to stay silent while a nation of people are slowly wiped from existence?
And he's totally right, because he goes into, how we view the Middle East and the West. I've spoke about this, I've written about this, I've made videos about this, how we view the Middle East in an Orientalist way, how we view it in a certain way, and how the media often gives us this narrative about what the Middle East is like. So he says lots of people think that's just how the region has always been, and there's no solving it and there's no helping it, basically. Also, he makes a very good point about why people haven't said anything, and he's saying it could be ignorance, or these people could be scared, and I believe that people could be scared because they feel like they'll get reprisals from their audience. They feel like maybe they will lose their job, and that's maybe not an unfounded concern. At my old job, I actually wrote an article about Gaza. Then I had these two people whose whole job, it seemed like from my WordPress blogs, was to harass people who covered the situation in Gaza, and they messaged my boss trying to get me fired. So that legit happened to me. But that can also happen to people standing up for Black Lives Matter, which Tamoor outlines as well. So you're willing to risk it in one regard, but not in another. And it was also very frustrating to see loads of people reply to Tamoor's tweet or retweet his tweet, and then that's it. And I've checked up on a couple of these people again. They haven't said anything else. They haven't liked anything. And I also feel a bit disgusted in a way. I feel like they're hiding behind Tamoor a bit. Like, oh, if we retweet Tamoor saying it, this British Pakistani Muslim, then maybe I won't get in trouble for sharing his message because I'm not actually formulating my own opinion on this stuff. I'm not calling this stuff out as bad. I'm just retweeting the one guy who was brave enough to call everyone else out. Again, I don't feel very comfortable with the dynamic that's happened. And people are like, well, maybe I was too ignorant. I couldn't say this stuff and I wanted to say stuff, but I haven't. But it takes Tamoor calling you out for you to do anything. Again, I find it pretty gross, to be honest. And I do think it's representative of the Western chauvinism that is just really ingrained in Western countries, and how we view Muslim lives is not equal to our own. Think about Tony Blair. He should be in prison. He shouldn't be in public life. But then he comes out like every couple of months talking about the Labour Party. And it's like, do we as a country just not value all the people's lives he destroyed? And the answer is, we don't. even so-called leftist people in the Labour Party often don't, because we rehabilitate this stuff. Anyway, massive shout out to Tamoor, and to their credit, a lot of journalists actually did say stuff and do stuff beyond just retweeting this guy, although a lot of people did just retweet him. But then IGN followed up on this stuff, so did Kotaku, and so did Gamespot, and they all posted different things trying to get people to donate to various charities helping Palestinian people at this very moment. But we're going to focus on IGN because with Game Informer, they're the only two outlets who have taken their stuff down. Now, I believe this was done by the editorial team in response to Tamoor calling them out. I don't know that for a fact, but this stuff happened after Tamoor made his video. So I feel like it may have had an influence, especially on the IGN editorial team, who might have felt called out, but I'm sure there actually is a lot of decent people at IGN who've wanted to say something throughout this whole time. So IGN tweeted on Friday, I think, Palestinian civilians are currently suffering in great numbers in Jerusalem, Gaza and the West Bank. Here are some great organisations you can donate to in order to help those in need. IGN also put a Palestinian flag next to their logo on their website. I've never seen anything like this. The conversation is definitely changing. And then the article said, how to help Palestinian civilians by IGN staff. So Palestinian civilians are currently suffering in great numbers in Jerusalem, Gaza and West Bank due to Israeli forces. The New York Times reported that most of the deaths so far have occurred in Gaza. We want to highlight the humanitarian crisis in Palestine because while there's been fighting in the region for decades, recent escalation has seen a catastrophic loss of Palestinian lives. Below are charities and organisations on the ground in those areas where you can donate funds to help them most in need. We will continue to update this article in other ways you can help. So they linked the Palestinian Relief Fund, ANERA, United Nations Relief and Works Agency, Medical Aid for Palestinians, Doctors Without Borders, and said at the end, for further reading on the region, check out this timeline of the conflict, why it seems to keep happening without resolution, some background on the current fighting, and a helpful feed of live updates. We hope you join us in helping civilians in need in these Middle East regions by donating to the above organisations and causes. So that is very admirable, and I commend the editorial team who actually did something. And it's one thing for these personal games journalists and games personalities to feel called out by Tamoor and personally say stuff, which they did. It's another thing to actually, do this stuff when you work for a giant corporation. So I do think it's quite brave because obviously a lot of people, it's not just their personal Twitter accounts, they're making it essentially the official policy of the US branch of IGN. Again, you'd never think this would go over well with corporate who have all these crazy brand deals. Did not go well with every branch of IGN though. So IGN Israel had a lot to say about this and had a big backlash about this. Now, people were speculating that this is just a licensing deal, whereas this company who is IGN Israel isn't really linked to IGN, but has just basically bought the branding for their games website. So it says, Dear netizens, we were also amazed to discover this morning a misleading and confusing donation campaign found on the American IGN website. It's important for us to emphasize that we condemn this action and we did not take part in it or were aware of it. It is not our way. We at IGN Israel support the Israel state, obviously, and support the IDF soldiers who are doing everything to keep us safe through these tough days. We are working in all possible ways to remove this misleading content from the American edition, which does not represent the views of any IGN editions. So that was one branch of IGN having a backlash. And this morning for me, it's probably late last night for Americans, IGN actually took down all this stuff. So did Game Informer. So Rami Ishmael saying, understand how important this is. Clearly, IGN and Game Informer editorial posted this under their editorial freedom. If these posts are gone, it's very likely means their corporate owners stepped in across the editorial barrier and forced the censorship of those humanitarian resources. So here's what the page looks like. First mate Nazir Fares saying, as a heads up for those of you who'd like to understand the power of media corporations, JT Global is the owner of IGN and have stakes in Israeli companies, including Safer VPN. Game Informer is owned by GameStop. Considering the stock volatility, well, you know. So some former and current IGN journalists actually tweeted about this, and Game Informer as well. So Lonnie at Very Friendly tweeted, as someone who used to work at IGN, I can almost guarantee this happened against the will of the good people working there. You can have the most passionate, caring staff, and it will mean nothing when there's some cowardly exec somewhere getting scolded by the parent company. So Liana Rupert, who you guys might know for bringing a lot of light to Cyberpunk and its problems of triggering seizures in people with epilepsy, tweeted that we are trying, with no context, but you know what she's trying to say there. Felicia Miranda saying, I'm actually really upset right now, and then linked an archive of IGN's post. Zachary Ryan, who works at IGN, saying, if you're still looking for where to donate to help the people of Palestine, check out these organisations, Palestine Relief Fund. And then just to end with one more tweet by Rami. So he says, it sucks IGN and Game Informer's posts and tweets with humanitarian resources supporting Palestine are gone, but it's clear their teams had no choice. They had a choice in posting, and unlike many others, they did. Can we send a quick supportive tweet for choosing to speak up? Nobody accidentally posts and tweets a list of resources to support the Palestinians. These are brave, potentially career-ending choices, and instead of blaming them for trying, let's support them for being brave and blame the corporate owners that censored them. The impact seeing the Palestinian flag next to the IGN logo had on me is impossible to overstate, or the article in Game Informer. Even if it was only for a day before their team was silenced, that day matters. How many people saw that flag, that post, and educated themselves? So there was a massive backlash on social media to what IGN did. And we're going to get into IGN's final both sides response. So IGN on their official Twitter account, the main one, said, across IGN, our hearts are heavy as we follow the events in Israel, Palestine, and across the region. Our first thought is always for the broader IGN community, our employees, readers, and partners, and our hopes for their safety and well-being. We have a track record of supporting humanitarian efforts and charities across the globe. In the instance of our recent post regarding how to help civilians in the Israel-Palestinian conflict, our instincts to help those in need was not in line with our intent of trying to show support for all people impacted by tragic events. By highlighting only one population, the post mistakenly left the impression that we were politically aligned with one side. That was not our intention, and we sincerely regret the error. We do intend to continue to use our platform and resources to aid those civilian lives impacted across the entire area. As part of this effort, we have made a donation of 25 grand to Save the Children, an organisation that works to support children everywhere and provides emergency aid in natural disasters, war and other conflicts. Thank you for your support and always engaging with us. Our community is a huge part of what makes IGN special. We will continue to follow global events and look for ways to lend our support in productive, helpful ways. Now, basically what most people are speculating, either the editorial team were forced to put this out, or it's just a corporate spokesperson who wrote that themselves. The framing of that is really bad, obviously. There are two sides in the conflict, acting like it's a conflict, like a legitimate conflict, where one side has all the power, all the weaponry, has one of the best militaries in the entire world, also has nuclear weapons, that doesn't admit that it has, versus people that have largely been living in awful conditions for decades and decades, not allowed to go where they want, no real access to proper resources. Israel exports water. In Gaza, it's very, very hard. I think it's like over 90% of the population don't have constant access to clean water. And that is the situation there. So they're acting like it's some sort of, conflict, and we've chosen a side. That's what the editorial team did. They chose a side in this conflict, and we didn't want to do that. No, they were standing up for innocent women and children. You've seen what the Israelis have been doing. It's disgusting. It's some of the worst stuff I've ever seen in my life. And to view that stuff and to not take the side of the oppressed and the people who are suffering most is just monstrous. And like I said, there's people pointing out that the parent company of IGN may have investments in Israeli companies, and the Israeli companies will not like that, obviously. Also, IGN Israel kicked up a bit of a stink about it as well.
So I just want to jump into this video really quick. I'm doing this after I've recorded it. IGN's employees have recently signed a letter to the leadership of these companies. It's pretty long, so I don't want to read it all, but I do want to read parts of it for you because, I think it's important and stuff, and I think it's something we should discuss in this video, although I can't actually comment on it with the rest of the recording. So let me get into it for you. So the decision to take down the post was made a day and a half after it was published. The takedown took place in the early hours of the morning on a weekend with no communication to its initial authors, the general IGN staff, or to the public as to why it happened. IGN's editorial team has guidelines about updating content deemed needful of changes, something that we've done multiple times in the past, but wholesale removal pieces about posting an explanatory statement is expressly against our policy. We feel the decision to remove the original article and social post, as well as a subsequent statement from management, is not only actively harmful to IGN's public reputation and its employees, but also highly disrespectful to much of its content team and broader staff. The statement inaccurately ascribes the retraction to those across IGN rather than to the members of our upper management team who made the decision, giving a public impression that the decision was made by the editorial staff, despite this being a choice we did not make collectively. which many of us do not agree with. Following an IGN-wide meeting this morning, we have come to an understanding that this was a clear instance of corporate overreach and demonstrated blatant disregard for the most basic standards of journalistic integrity and editorial independence. The business interests of a publication's ownership and its editorial staff should stay separate at all times. Importantly, we feel the latest statement dangerously turns what was a matter of supporting innocent civilians facing a crisis into a harmful case of both sides-ism. That's what I've actually said in the video, so I'm grateful they're calling this out as well. Helping children and civilians harmed by war should be uncontroversial, no matter who the two sides are, and is in keeping with IGN's ongoing efforts to highlight causes that are important to our team, such as our support for Black Lives Matter last year and our most recent celebration of AAPI Heritage Month and joining the call to end AAPI hate. These victims deserve the same support. We, the undersigned, are calling for an all-hands meeting that includes IGN upper management and anyone at J2 Global or Ziff Davis who had a hand in the decision by the end of the week, in which we would like full transparency about the reasoning and process behind the post removal. We would ask the management body responsible for the decision accept that responsibility publicly. We ask that management recognise IGN's editorial authority and autonomy with regards to what it publishes, regardless of whether the work is news, reviews, features, guides, video content, or promotion of initiatives our staff feel are important, such as issues, awareness, or charitable support. While we want to make sure all voices on our team, IGN management included, feel able to weigh in on what we say as a site, how we say it, we are adamant that corporate leadership does not get the final word in editorial decisions. Finally, we ask that management work with our staff to republish the piece. We are open to doing this through a process that incorporates management feedback and concerns about how its content is perceived, but we firmly believe that we must be allowed to advocate for humanitarian causes freely across all our channels. And you can go and have a look who signed that if you want to. Most people that are pretty prominent, I'm just flicking through the list right now, that you will know from IGN, have signed it. I don't know if there's anyone who didn't want to sign it, but that's fair enough, I guess. But you can go read the entire statement on Twitter. Just thought I would, read this response as it was basically breaking news while I was editing. And I would just say, as admirable as this is, I'm not sure how it would play out because, I've, made the whole point about the video, I don't think ethics and, games journalism can be compatible while in a corporate structure like IGN. But let's see, maybe these things will change thanks to things like this letter.
But just to finish the point on the games journalist, I respect a lot of the people in games journalism who've been speaking up the whole time. People who advocate for great causes, no matter what really. It's Black Lives Matter, it's Palestine, they will do it. And there's a lot of people who will do it. But I'm very disappointed in a lot of them as well. Not for the team at IGN that wrote this and the team at Game Informer. I'm annoyed that, a lot of these people personally had to be prompted by Tamoor to say this stuff. And it's very frustrating for people who do political activism on their platforms, be that Twitter, Twitch, or YouTube, but suddenly when it comes to Palestine, they just don't do it. And like I said, when you see what's happening right now, there's a right and a wrong. And you know what side is in the wrong. You know what side is doing the hurting. And I've said this before, my other things, as someone with an Irish background, Irish people who were involved in the struggle for independence, Irish people who suffered and died struggling for independence, of course I'm always going to sympathise with the Palestinians. There are obviously many parallels with the British and what they did to Ireland and Israel, what they're doing to Palestine. Although you could easily make the argument what the Israelis have been doing to the Palestinians is far worse. When you look at Gaza, I tweeted this the other day, could you imagine tower blocks of Catholic civilians getting levelled in Belfast as reprisals for the actions of the IRA or something? You just couldn't imagine it. Not saying that some fanatics of the Orange Order and maybe the British Army would maybe want to do that stuff, but you just can't imagine that happening. It all ties back to Tamoor's point that we don't value Muslim lives equally. And as a broader point, we don't value non-white lives equally. Because like I said, you cannot imagine Hydra jets doing that in the 1980s or 1990s in Belfast. But it's just the common reality in what's been happening in Gaza for decades. And it's totally disgusting. But now let's tie this back to the capitalism point. So like I said in my other video, you cannot have ethics in games journalism under capitalism. And IGN, and I said in that video, IGN is the worst offender because here you have an outlet which is meant to impartially review games, impartially report on crunch conditions, impartially report on, scandals in the game industry, while at the same time making massive ad deals with companies like CD Projekt Red, doing advertising for them. And like I explained, This isn't Google ads or anything. It's not just random ads. They specifically make deals with these companies for banner ads and videos and trailers. So they are directly already in bed with the video games development side. So do you really expect objective reporting there? IGN and other companies like that got away with the Black Lives Matter stuff because it got adopted by these massive corporations trying to make themselves look better without really getting into the roots of what Black Lives Matter, the organisation, stands for. They basically sanitized it. And they're like, Black Lives Matter is just a slogan, when it's actually an organisation with quite a radical agenda, including a support for the Palestinians and being pro-BDS is something that Black Lives Matter do. And it's funny that a lot of these games journalists would also link to Black Lives Matter. You can go fund them. You can go fund this agenda. But when it actually comes to this agenda being shoved in my face, where I have to see this Palestinian stuff happen, I'm going to stay silent until one of the few prominent Muslim journalists actually calls out the industry. And then you have the parent company, which owns so much stuff, owns lots of brands, owns things like Humble Bundle as well, the thing you get a bunch of games for cheap and stuff. It is so in bed with the video games industry, so it's not really surprised it would also have investments in things like VPNs. And then it has a conflict of interest there when their editorial team are saying they stand with the oppressed in Palestine, while IGN Israel is, kicking up a fuss about that, and while the actual company that owns it maybe is getting their bottom line threatened and the board's bottom line threatened, because it's probably likely the Israeli companies contain a lot of people who support the actions of the state of Israel, and then they might get funny, threaten to pull their business, and then that's how you get what you get with IGN, both siding stuff. So massive credit to Tamoor for being brave and calling this stuff out. And it needed calling out by someone who was a bit more prominent, because it was there to all to see. I follow a lot of games journalists and games media personalities. None of them have been saying anything until he said that. Literally, I was really disappointed. I was going on their page and be like, you haven't even liked a tweet. You haven't even retweeted something. And you've been such a big voice for other stuff that's political. And you haven't done this. So credit to him. Also, I'm very disappointed in the people who just retweeted and favorited that tweet, put a love heart in the comments, and that's it. Like, that's not enough. Especially if you're one of these people who acts like a political activist on other subjects that are kind of similar, like the oppression of African Americans in the United States, and then you're just silent on this stuff. So again, maybe want to look into your soul a bit and think about, maybe use your platform for good. And as a little side note, massive shout out to organisers and streamers and YouTubers who have been raising money for the Palestinians. Also, you can go to hell. A lot of the people I know who've literally said nothing, not even tweeted about it. Like, what is wrong with you? You're Twitch streamers and YouTubers who literally upload every single day, and you can't mention this for like 5 seconds, but you talk about Hong Kong, you talk about Afghanistan, you talk about all these things, and you can't talk about Palestine. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Come join our communities on Discord and my subreddit. That is in the description. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram at the Kavernacle if you want to support my work. Check out my Patreon and get access to the exclusive Patreon only Discord. Sounds way better than it actually is. And then if you made it this far, thanks for watching.